Hey everyone, I'm going to keep this introduction short for the sake of time, but I do feel like I should say sort of why I wanted to make this channel. And I think I'll just do that after the actual prep that I do in this video. So I'll put a timestamp in the description so you can check it out. Otherwise, let's just jump right into it. 30 occlusal, prepping for an amalgam filling. I've got our 245 burr that we're going to use to start here. And what I'm doing right now is just finding the right orientation of that burr in space. I want to make sure that it's perpendicular to the plane of occlusion, not the long axis of the tooth, because this tooth is tilted lingually, and we want to make sure that our filling lines up with the occlusal plane rather than the long axis of the tooth. So you can see we're just going to start with a depth cut, and it goes about 70 to 80% of the cutting surface of our 245. That's something you want to keep in mind the whole time that you're doing your prep, because it needs to be within 1.5 and 2.5 millimeters. So I find that keeping the right angle of the burr within the tooth, as well as the depth, to be the most important factors in determining whether or not your prep will turn out. I'm not using water because I didn't want to get my camera wet. Of course, you'll be doing that in the lab. So I mostly start here by just extending through the central groove. And then after that, I start to work into the secondary grooves. Right. And so I should mention the way we're holding this handpiece is the modified pen grasp. And you can see your ring finger or pinky will be fulcruming on probably the premolars if you're sitting at 11 to 12 o'clock like I am. And then you have your index finger and your middle finger gripping with the thumb against the rest of the handpiece. Now, the weight of the handpiece is not really held by the tips of my fingers. It's more so along the palm there. And that'll help make sure that your wrists don't get too sore, or your fingers don't get too sore either. And one thing I do as I extend into these other grooves is sort of look at the mouth from a couple different angles. I know you can't see right now, but I'll sort of tilt my head to one side and then to the other, just to make sure that I'm lined up well with those grooves and that the angle of my burr is still perpendicular to the plane of occlusion. And it almost looks on this larger view here that the burr is tilted buccally. But if you look at this bottom right view, you can see that it lines up well with the plane of occlusion. So if you were to lay a flat piece of metal or paper across all the bottom teeth, the burr would be perpendicular to that. You can see that better now. So up to this point, I've been pressing on the rheostat pretty much all the way, maybe 80 to 100%. And now that I'm smoothing out a couple of these walls, I'm pressing more lightly on the rheostat just to make sure that I don't extend too far and I can keep this prep conservative. So I've edited out some of the water and air. So if you see the screen go black, that's why. Right, so now we're looking at this from about 8 o'clock or so. That's the view of the camera anyway. And it's nice from that view to place the mirror along the molar like I just did there, because that kind of gives us an overhead view as if we were looking at it benchtop. So if you go back and pause the video sort of where I had that mirror, it looks like the lingual groove there, the extension wasn't as far as I wanted it to be, so I was just going in and extending further there. This area too is really one of the harder spots to prepare with this tooth, because for some reason with our dentiform teeth, it's the shallowest spot on the tooth. So when you go in and you probe for the first time, there's a good chance that you will be underextended there. And the depth will be more in the 1 millimeter range, even though you're still at the 2 millimeter mark with the triangular ridges. Okay, so we got our mirror again. We're taking another look. It looks a lot better. Extended well into the grooves. We're just trying to look at it from different angles to make sure that there aren't any steps on those occlusal walls. Not worrying too much about the pulpal floor yet. So now we're checking depth. You can see 2 millimeter mark, 2 millimeter mark, maybe 1.5. 2 there, 1.5 again. 2 there. Coming across, looks like 2.5 there. 2 there. And about 2 millimeters in that mesial triangular fossa. All right, so we can take another look at our outline form. It looks pretty good from this angle. And that's going to be our best representation there with the mirror of what this preparation will look like on the bench top, which of course is how your practicals are going to be graded, as opposed to in the mouth. So again, just light pressure on that rheostat, going in and smoothing out a few of those walls. When you check depth too with the probe, it does help to look at it from a couple different angles. You want to make sure you're measuring right where that probe meets the cavo surface margin. And sometimes, since the tooth is all white, it can be tough to tell exactly where that is. So keep that in mind. Okay, now we switch burrs to the longest, skinniest diamond burr. And it has a nice taper to it, which can help us get divergence at the grooves and at these marginal ridges. Probably 95% of operative I do with the 245, but occasionally I like to switch the burr up to do something like this when we need divergence. I think most of my classmates are probably similar in that we both or all of us use the 245 the most. But there's no one correct burr to use. I know some people like to use the 330 because it's closer to a 2 millimeter length cutting surface, and that can be nice to make sure that you don't overextend. But I found when I use it that if I go beyond that cutting surface, or if I want to go beyond that, the walls tend to get steps. because the top of the burr leaves sort of a discrepancy at the cable surface margin, while the cutting surface extends below that, creating a step. So we're going to smooth out this pulpal floor now, kind of as a final step. And we're just going to use this nice, sharp, straight hatchet for this. So when I first got my kits, my straight hatchet was very heavily used. And if there was one thing I could go back and do differently, it would probably be to ask dispensing for a brand new small hatchet, because it really made life a lot easier getting a nice sharp one, especially once you get into class twos and work on those proximal boxes. Okay, so we finished up here. We're taking a look at our tooth benchtop now, and we can see we're happy with our outline form. It looks pretty smooth along the pulpal floor and especially the occlusal walls. I probably could have smoothed out the pulpal floor a little more, but this is definitely acceptable. So yeah, that's it. Make sure to pause the video at some of those last views to see the divergence along the grooves there, as well as the convergence along the triangular ridges. Okay, so now I'll just sort of talk about why I actually made this channel. And I guess the biggest reason is because I wanted to see more work done in the mouth as opposed to benchtop. As I was going through different preclinical courses, I realized a lot of the angles people use with their hands and handpieces and different instruments to work on benchtop procedures just isn't possible in the real mouth. So I wanted to see more or show more about how people can actually position their hands and finish these procedures on a real mannequin. I do think that those benchtop videos are great for showing you what an ideal prep or filling does look like, and they're definitely useful for just getting a general idea of how to do these procedures. So I do recommend that you look into those and a lot of the other different channels here on YouTube. So I just want to end by saying this is really just one way of doing this. There are a lot of different ways and techniques that you can use and will pick up with more experience that will help you make great preps. So I hope it's helpful. Make sure to comment below if you have any suggestions for me to sort of improve these videos. Obviously, I'm new to editing, so I'm working on that and whatnot. But other than that, that's all. So good luck with this, and I will see you in the next video.